Welcome to Leading in Luxury, the podcast where we sit down with visionaries and innovators shaping the future of boutique and luxury hospitality. I'm your host, Daniel Renna, founder of DMR AI Hospitality Solutions. We work with hospitality brands and service-driven businesses to help them elevate guest experience, strengthen leadership, and scale intelligently without losing the human touch that defines true luxury. If you're a hotelier, restaurateur, operator, or a hospitality leader looking to take your brand to the next level, make sure you stay with us throughout this episode. Subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and follow us on Spotify as well. Today, I'm honored to welcome Steven Ferry, founder of both the International Institute of Modern Butlers and DNA QA, one of the world's leading authorities on luxury service. Steven has trained butlers and service professionals across hundreds of hotels, resorts, and cruise ships worldwide, including playing a key role in the launch of Marina Bay Sands in Singapore. Steven, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you, and a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. Steven, your work with the International Institute of Modern Butlers has shaped service standards globally. Early on, quality assurance and hospitality focused heavily on facilities and tangible elements. What prompted you to shift that focus so dramatically towards soft skills and the human element?
There have been an overall trend is toward high tech. Ever since, actually, as a butler, what I valued most was the soft skills, because I saw that's what was most important in dealing with other people. If you didn't lay the table quite right as a butler, that's not the end of the world. Pee off the boss. I'm talking about private service here. It's a bit of a non-starter. And I didn't see this actually being taught. Particularly, I went to butler school in London years ago, decades ago. That wasn't particularly the focus. It was very rote, shall I say. There's a certain image that you had to maintain as a butler, a certain persona, but that didn't necessarily mean that you were providing good service for people. In some ways it did, because there are some very good fundamentals in the butler world, which after 1,000 years of practice, we've sort of put together as this is how you serve people who have high standards. Definitely needed. But beyond that, you can't have an emotionally unengaged butler in most cases. In the old style butler required being, how shall I say, standoffish.
Right.
You had to have a bit of an attitude about you, but that really doesn't work in the rest.
That's what it's like in the movies.
Yes, exactly. And it's the great cliche stereotype cardboard character. And I guess we all love it in a way or don't like it at all. It's better than nothing if you don't have much understanding of life. And I don't really think that butlers over the centuries have had much understanding of life, if I may say so, because they were never taught it. They lived it and they were brought up in very strict circumstances that guaranteed something that was workable. But was it optimal? No. And that's why I helped launch with two German colleagues, a DNA QA, and years before that, launched the International Institute of Modern Butlers. We were asked actually to help set and raise standards in the butler profession. And it wasn't long before butlers were starting to appear rather numerously in hotels and resorts and cruise ships. I then switched from private service to hospitality service because the demand was so great. We found about 80% of what we did was training butlers. And there were a number of players doing the training, but there was no real consensus. And there certainly wasn't anything, very little actually. Some people were looking at the soft skills, but they lacked the technology as far as I was concerned. And that's why I made the switch.
What core principles do you believe truly define luxurious service today?
I think caring. It's not a service, but it's a fundamental to anything you do. If you really care about the person you're dealing with and your attention isn't focused on maximizing tips or just going through your duties, you will elevate your service level to where it needs to be to deal with guests. I think we've all been in a situation where in a hotel or a resort, the person really didn't care about us. His attention was on something else. And it could be just simply a logistics thing. That one poor butler has got, and I'm sort of look at things from the viewpoint of butlers mainly, but it applies to anybody. If a service provider has got too many guests to look after, he's not going to be able to really care about or be able to deal with them all. He might care a lot about the person in front of him, but then he doesn't have time to deal with the other guests. And that's a no-no. So that makes it difficult. But where you have luxury property, plus really caring staff who know how to do emotional engagement, which is sort of the goal or an important goal in hospitality over the last several years, then you have a winner, because you are going to be really feeling the guest and doing what the guest would like to see and isn't used to having done.
No, indeed. So you've trained teams across diverse cultures, from Western audiences to Chinese guests at Marine Bay Sands, where expectations around invisible service were very different. How do cultural nuances impact the delivery and perception of luxury service? And how do you train teams to adapt effectively without losing authenticity?
Well, if you really care about the guests and other people in general, not just guests, then authenticity will be there, whatever you're having to present to the guest according to their preferences. So the first thing to know, of course, is what is the market or the main public for the hotel or resort. And that was one thing I failed to do at Marina Bay Sands when we helped with the launch. Because about 3 months after we left, we thought we did a really good job. But then the VP calls saying, "Oi, I need you back." Why? It's because most of his guests are Chinese, and they have a different, and I mean mainland Chinese.
Right.
And their expectation of service is that it be in your face and absolutely abhorrent to the West, to most Western guests. They don't want to be bothered the whole time. There has to be, I haven't looked at this mindset behind it, but I think they don't want to have pretend service. It has to be real service, which means they see it or they feel it or something. Anyway, we went back and retrained them so that depending on the guests they were dealing with, they would either provide in-your-face service for the mainland Chinese majority or invisible service for those who appreciated it.
So I'm wondering about that. Is how did you I mean, you had spent a lot of time with the staff as you had trained them. How did you come back to them and said, "Hey, everything I taught you doesn't work for those people. You have to do a totally different thing over there." How did that go down with the staff? And from a psychological, from a morale standpoint?
Well, it wasn't a big deal because they themselves found out with the Chinese before I told them. This isn't working so well. So I guess it was a bit of a relief for them, for me to come back and give them a bit more training and pointers for the Chinese market. It wasn't a case of we've messed up. It was more a case of, hey, we need to get smarter about this. And we did
Gotcha.
get smarter because we recognize that there are different markets. I mean, in the Middle East as well, there's sort of a similar expectation. For instance, you can, with some royalty from one of the GCC countries, they'll say, "Here's my dry cleaning. Do it. Get it done." And you say, "Yes, sir." And you go away and you haven't even made it to the dry cleaner. And he's calling up saying, "Is my dry cleaning done yet?" Well, okay. I guess they're probably used in their culture to having things not being done or people being slow or lazy. So the only way to handle that in their view is to ride them until they get their dry cleaning back. Obviously, I'm generalizing. It's
Of
not true
course.
of everyone in the Middle East, but it's
Right.
certainly been my experience.
That's so interesting. So you touched on it earlier, but like you said, we're seeing an exponential rise in technology across hospitality. You've even mentioned having a sensible conversation with ChatGPT. How do you see AI and technology impacting the future of luxury hospitality, especially when it comes to balancing high-tech efficiency with the high-touch human connection that defines true luxury?
Right. Well, it was John Nesbitt who first blew the whistle on that. And that was like 30, 40 years ago with his book, I think it was High Touch, High Tech. High tech, high touch. I see it being increasingly a disaster if we don't act. I think we first started seeing this in phone trees. This is going back a long way, where you all you do is you yell down the phone, "Representative," thinking to yourself, "You bloody idiot." Talking about the phone tree. I had a similar experience. I was doing some training up at East Hamptons, and I rented a beautiful Mercedes from JFK, and my wife and I were talking, and it kept talking to us. And at one point, I swore at it. And the response was quite remarkable. It just made us laugh like crazy. "Don't talk to me like that. I have feelings too," was what the robot said. Okay. But it has gotten to the point where the effort to try and keep high touch in place, because despite the high tech, is just a bit off the wall. But I was very pleasantly surprised, as you mentioned, when I used ChatGPT. I tried to use another one, which I thought was better, but it wasn't up and running. And I was actually impressed with its intelligence. And it was like, I haven't had a conversation like this with a human for a long time, where you can actually just talk to them and not get argued into oblivion with fixed ideas. I don't mind arguing, but I don't like people throwing fixed ideas at me because
Right.
it's no better than the robot, which has been programmed with certain ideas, and that's all it can voice or express. And so and by the way, I think it's social media that has put us in this position where people are just operate on fixed ideas and yell at each other the whole time. It's because we've lost that high touch. We don't talk to people anymore I'm sure there are some people who would agree with me, certainly in hospitality, because that's what hospitality is about. The word actually pushes us in the direction of actually talking to people.
Right.
And I've always been very impressed, just to digress again, with GMs and RMs at the better resorts, at least in hotels, who have a fantastic ability to communicate. And a lot of them actually are genuinely interested in people, and they're the better communicators. Otherwise, you get the guys who think, oh, now I've got to spend another hour in the lobby. And they look at their watch thinking, when's it over? Separates out the sheep from the goats, so to speak.
No, exactly.
Yeah. So
how do you,
all right.
how do you see AI and technology impacting the future of luxury hospitality, especially when it comes to balancing the high tech, high touch, the balance there?
That's a good question. As I said, I see it impacting it negatively unless we do something about it. And I know that the whistle is being blown by Elon Musk and others in general that, there is a takeover going on, which is now a runaway takeover almost. And to the degree we all lie down and say, okay, well, that's the way it is, khalas, as they say in the Middle East, then that's basically a very apathetic response. We need to stay in control of this and steer it in the right direction. And as I was saying, the phone trees started it, and it got more and more automated and less contact with people. And that's why people yell into the phone, representative, because you can't talk to a bunch of circuitry.
Correct.
Which is what robots are. And unfortunately, some people are also throw circuitry at you. Not many in hospitality. I think people who work in hospitality are the higher beings, the ones generally who are more in communication, more aware, and do actually care and talk to you themselves. There's a difference between the person talking and a bunch of circuitry, things that they've learned, and they just press a button and words come out of their mouth. And they are actually becoming robots themselves if they aren't already, and they're no better than robots. So we have a two-prong attack. We have to raise the level of engagement between people so it's them interested in the guests, actually even loving the guests, who are actually talking to the guests when they're talking. And they're smart enough to notice, I shouldn't be talking right now, the guest isn't interested. But a robot doesn't have that finesse. It doesn't have that perception. It's not aware of being aware. And that's the difference between a human who is aware. What are they aware of? Yes, they're aware of the environment, but they also have to take one step back and be aware of being aware.
Right.
You see, and then you've got a live being in front of you rather than someone who's descended into semi-robotism.
That's a very good point. I mean, do we make the robots more like us or do we become more like the robots, I guess? Drawing from everything that you've seen globally, if you had a magic wand and could fix one thing that most luxury hospitality brands are struggling with right now, something that's quietly holding them back from delivering truly exceptional service at scale, what would that one thing be?
Well, that's easy. I mean, there are a number of things, but EQ is the most important. And unfortunately, it's not. They're struggling with it because the people who teach EQ don't understand EQ. They don't even understand emotions, actually. And I hate to sound like some sort of know-it-all from on high speaking to the riffraff. That's not my intent at all. It's just unfortunate that the subject of emotions hasn't been really developed and understood. I point my finger at psychiatry and psychology because they're the guys in charge of this subject, and they don't know diddly squat about emotions. And so when people are trained to become trainers, they say, which itself is a misnomer. EQ is nonsense. It's based on IQ, and it sort of gives the apparency of science to emotions. So when actually there is an element of science in it, but it hasn't been understood. And it is IQ, intelligence quotient, is actually a mathematical formula for working out someone's intelligence.
Right.
And it is scientific or mathematical. It is valid. But then to simply name EQ to try and take some of the kudos or some of the credibility of IQ and transfer it into EQ is a wrong foot forward. And then the next thing to do is define what are emotions. And once you've done that, then you'll also, if you start researching it and looking in the right places, you'll find that there's a way to raise people's emotions. Why is that important? Is because our job in hospitality is to make people happy or happier, you know. With every interaction, there should be some little raising or even a big raising. And when you do that, you're really providing a service and you are creating loyalty. I'll give you a little clue. What are emotions? Well, one thing emotions are is, one way of defining them is wavelengths. They are actual wavelengths, just in the same way as light and infrared are different wavelengths. The wavelength being the length of the wave is a standard way of saying, and it's basically energy. And where does this energy come from? It comes from the person himself. They are generating a certain wavelength of energy according to their mood. When you just found out that someone ran over your pet cat, you might start crying. That's an emotion. It has an energy wavelength associated with it. And the thing is, once you understand emotions, you know that there's a scale of emotions, top to bottom. And the higher you go on the scale, the happier you are. So if you know that, then all you have to do is teach people what emotions are, drill them on it, tell them what the scale is, and have them practice raising someone's emotion. Or, if nothing else, match the emotion. If you match the emotional level, that person will feel, well, we've got even the expression in English, man, that guy's on my wavelength.
Right.
It's sort of an inherent understanding on the part of humanity, or at least people who use that phrase, that there are wavelengths, and they recognize that this guy is just like me. And that really puts a bond there, and it makes the communication flow. But even better than that, especially in life in general, but also in hospitality, if you raise the person's emotion by going above their emotional level, they will follow you up. And the opposite is also true. If you go below where they are, inadvertently, usually not deliberately, you will lower their emotion, you make them less happy.
Interesting.
And just one more thing about emotions. Being a wavelength, if you've ever used a walkie-talkie with somebody else, you tell them to tune to channel 1, and he tunes to channel 2. In other words, a different wavelength. You talking, and he doesn't receive anything you say, and that's exactly what happens if you use the wrong emotion.
Right. No, that's a good point. That's a really good point. Steven, thank you so much for sharing your thoughtful insights on the art of service, the future of luxury hospitality, and even sort of like how we fit emotions in with our technological future. Your perspective on emotional intelligence, particularly in cultural nuance and the balance between high tech and high touch, has been incredibly valuable. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, Daniel, and thank you for hosting it.
Indeed. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning into Leading in Luxury. We'll include a link to the International Institute of Modern Butlers in the description below. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like it and subscribe to the channel. I'm Daniel Renna. I'll see you next time.